Hello and welcome back to EVE Online, and footage you're seeing here at the moment is me coming into Sail In with the Alpha and finding these two guys, Littoral Combat Ship and Yephar Nahtepa, and neither of them could get the upper hand, but that's not always the case. So I'm actually going to hand you over now to Yephar himself. We've played EVE together for 9 years. He's actually my son, but we won't make a big deal out of that. But it's great that we've got a game we can play together. I'm going to hand you straight over to him. He's going to talk you through his spectacular Hyperion fit and another one of the fights that he's had with Littoral in his Praxis. And respected Littoral Combat Ship, he comes into low sec. He lives in low sec, but he floats around in his ships. He's always looking for a fight. He'll fight anyone. He's a gentleman. Respect to you, mate. He makes content just by going out there and finding a fight. But anyway, that's enough of me. Let's get on with it, shall we?
Hello everybody, my name's Yep, Thin Trash's occasional partner in piracy, and today I'm going to be going over a fight I had in this lovely ship here, the Hyperion. Now, the Hyperion is a Galente battleship that focuses entirely on dealing and taking damage. It gets a 10% bonus to large hybrid turret damage per level, and a 7.5% bonus to armor repair amount per level. Now, I've currently got a Galente battleship trained to level 4, so I'm getting a 40% and a 30% bonus respectively here. I've fit my Hyperion to capitalise off those bonuses as much as I can. So in the high slots I've got 6 meta neutron blasters. Now the reason I picked neutron blasters is simply because they deal the most damage out of the blaster variations. They also have the worst tracking, although hopefully that's not going to be an issue in this fight because it's going to be a battleship duel. Now up here I've got a heavy energy neutralizer. Now this is so that I can drain the enemy's capacitor, hopefully shut down their modules and help kill them a lot easier. Over in the mid slots, I've got a 500 meganewton micro warp drive for getting myself around. I've got a scram and a web for keeping the enemy tackle down. I've got a heavy capacitor booster. Now this is to keep my ship running because it uses a lot of cap with the dual rep, the 6 guns and the neutralizer. See, if I didn't have this, my cap would empty out in 50 seconds, which is not at all what we want. Now this module here, it's a stasis grappler, which is similar to a stasis web of fire, except it's got an optimal range. Now what this optimal range means is if it's within 1000 meters, it will slow the enemy down by 82.5%, but the further out of the optimal range it gets, it slows them down less and less. They get diminishing returns over range. Over in the low slots, I've got a large ancillary armor repairer. I've got a large Tech 2 armor repairer. That gives me most of my tank in terms of reps. I have got a damage control here as well to help with a little bit of buffer in the structure. I'll elaborate on that in a minute. And I've got a reactive armor hardener. Now what this reactive armor hardener does is it takes a 60% resist pool and it splits it out over the damage types that you're taking. Now it starts out having 15% in each resist, but as you start taking armor damage it will adjust the damage types that you're taking and it will spread the 60% over those too. This is quite good for 1v1s and occasionally for PvE, but it wouldn't be too good in a large scale fleet fight where you could potentially be getting hit with lots of different damage types. You'd be better off just having an adaptive nanomembrane or something in there to give you static resists. In terms of damage mods, I've got 2 magnetic field stabilizers and I've got a drone damage amp. Now the reason I haven't just fit 3 magnetic field stabilizers is because of diminishing returns. Now the Hyperion can actually fly a full flight of heavies, which does deal quite a lot of DPS, almost 400. Now, I actually get more total DPS if I have 1 drone damage amp than if I just had 3 magnetic field stabilizers in there, so that's why that's there. Now, up here in the rigs, we've got a large anti-explosive pump to patch up our explosive resist hole, which is commonplace in armor tank ships. We've got a large auxiliary nano pump, which increases the amount that our armor repairers repair. If you look with it on, they repair 1624 HP, but if I turn it off, it only does 1412, so it's quite a big difference that adds up a lot over time. And this one here is a large transverse bulkhead, which actually increases our structure by 20%. Now you may be wondering, well, if you're an armor tank ship, why are you putting a structure rig on it? Well, the Hyperion has one of the strongest base structure HPs in the game out of all the T1 battleships. Now what that means is I've actually got more structure hit points than I've got armor hit points. So if my reps can't quite keep up with the amount of damage that I'm taking, and I start bleeding into structure, there's a lot of buffer in structure. So if I'm taking too much damage, I can actually survive in structure for quite a long time, hopefully. Now, down in the drones, I've got a full flight of heavies, as I mentioned earlier, and I've also got 2 flights of lights. Now, I could bring a full flight of mediums, but I'd like to have the lights because this ship has a hard time dealing with frigates and other small ships, because it's got the worst tracking guns out of all the blasters. So I carry the 2 flights of lights to deal with that. And over in my cargo hold, I've got 7 spare cat boosters, which brings it up to 8 total. Now, I can't carry any more than 8, no matter how many tricks I try. So that's what I'm stuck with. Now, I can run for about 10 minutes under constant heavy fire if I turn my neutralizer off, which isn't too bad. I've got some spare ammo for my guns. I've got a spare reload of nanite paste for my ancillary armor repairer. I've got some boosters down here. Now, what these boosters do is I've got ones that increase my armor repair amount. This one gives a flat 5% bonus to armor and shield repair. And this one over here is a little bit more complex. Now, this one gives me a 20% armor repair bonus, but it also has a 20% chance of giving me a side effect. Now, that side effect can be any one of these 4. It could be a 20% armor hit point penalty, which would reduce my buffer tank over here. It could be a 20% turret tracking penalty, which would hurt my tracking even more. That might actually start to become an issue in the fight if I get that. A missile explosion radius penalty of 20%. Now, that just reduces missile application, kind of similar to tracking. And a 20% capacitor capacity penalty. Now, that reduces your total amount of capacitor. That wouldn't really affect me though, because I'm using Cap Booster, which always gives me 3,200 cap. So, the only one that would really hurt me here would be the armor hit points or the turret tracking. Now, I also carry a couple of spare modules on me. I don't always have the reactive armor hardener fit. If I'm running a site, or I'm going into a fleet fight, I'll tend to take the... no, not going into fleet fight. Now, I also carry some spare fitting stuff with me. Sometimes I'll swap out my reactive armor hardener for one of these other 2 modules here. The reactive armor hardener, as I explained earlier, is only really good for 1v1. So if I'm going into a large-scale fleet fight, I will swap it for another magnetic field stabilizer, which will bump my DPS up by about 100. Because in a fleet fight, active tank ships tend to die pretty quickly because of the amount of DPS on grid. So if I get primaried, I'm kind of dead anyway, so I might as well just deal as much damage while I'm not being primaried. And if I'm going into a site, I'll fit an energized adaptive nano membrane. I do sometimes run sites in this because it's tanky and because it does a lot of damage. But that just gives me a flat resistance increase. Now I've got about 60% resist, which is a lot nicer than the 50 or so I had with the reactive in. Now, in terms of numbers on this fit, if I overheat my armor repairers, I assume that my reactive armor hardener has gone to 30% resist in 2 resists, and I've taken my drugs. I will have roughly an 1800 DPS tank. Now that's a lot more than most Tech 1 battleships can put out, and even some faction battleships. So in terms of 1v1, I'll be absolutely fine in terms of tank. That's what I like about it. And numbers, if I overheat my guns, not take the ammo out of them, and select my ogres. For some reason, whenever you simulate a fit, it puts on the smallest drones it can find. I'm doing 1200 DPS, which is quite a lot of DPS. That would be enough to just punch straight through some tank battleships, and if not, it's enough to apply constant DPS to make them run out of cap boosters faster than me. As you can see, this is a relatively expensive fit. It's 290 mil, which for mostly Tech 2 fit Tech 1 battleship is kind of roughly what I'd expect. So that pretty much covers it in terms of the fit. Now let's get on to the fight itself. When there's a little bit of context, before I go out in this Hyperion, he did actually catch me off guard into my quite expensive Vedmak. Now this is not 53 million, this is about 200 million. For some reason the game hasn't quite adjusted to the price of the Vedmak hull yet. Alright, so I'm outside the station, I'm ready to fight. I've taken my boosters for a previous fight, so they're still running. I've got my drones out ready to go, I've got my reactive armor hardener cycling. And let's start fighting. Oh, alright, fight's on. I've got my guns on, scrams on, webs and everything on. I turn my micro warp drive on once to make sure he doesn't pull range. I don't need to keep my Webify running at the same time, the grappler's enough, so I can turn that off to save cap. Now, his shield's actually going down very, very fast, so I'm going to start overheating my gun straight away to pile as much damage on him as I can. Right, I've just hit armor, so I'm going to turn one of my armor repairers on. He's already getting into very low shield. He's bleeding armor just a tad. I'm tanking this just fine. I think I'm actually going to over-tank this a little bit. I didn't need that much repping. Right, he started overheating his shield booster, so I'm going to stop overheating my gun so I'm not wasting it. I'm going to wait for him to finish overheating so he can't overheat anymore, then I'll start overheating again to break through him. Cap's getting a little bit low here, so I'll cap up. I'll start overheating my guns again now. Now that my reactive armor hardener is adjusted, you can see my armor's barely moving. Right, I'm getting a little bit low in armor here. He's hitting structure. I'm going to have to put a couple more reppers on. It's just a matter of time before he goes down by the looks of things. Alright, and he's almost dead. I think he gets one more rep cycle off before he goes down. Oh, one more. There it is. Alright, nice. Ignore the fact that I left my armor repair running and overheated. That's irrelevant. The fight's over. Alright, let's see if he had anything nice on him. Oh, my drones have started shooting his drones, and I don't want to kill them. I want to scoop them and sell them. He had a couple blingy modules that dropped. That faction coprocessor and a faction ballistic control system that also applies a damage buff to drones. So I'm going to take those. The other bits are not worth too much and they're quite big. So I've got the loot I want. I'm going to get off grid. Alright, that pretty much concludes the fight. I'll come back and loot these drones later in a faster ship that's not going to take 3 years to burn to them.
Well, there we go, and I'm sure you enjoyed that as much as I did. Thank you very much, Yephar Nahtepa, and your PvP dual rep Hyperion. We'll be making some more kind of quicker, here's a ship, here's a fit, here what we do with it videos very, very soon. But leave us a like if you've liked it, leave any comments, suggestions, ideas you may have. Subscribe if you want to stay in touch, and for now, goodbye.